Jon, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, I was trying to invite Jon for a few times. He's so busy. He's really busy, and suddenly now it worked out. So we are very happy, and we're keen to learn about Techstars and how you started. Before we jump in,
you're very persistent.
That's me. Yeah.
A very good trait with entrepreneurs, but that's another story.
Yes. So talking about entrepreneurship, how did you start?
I don't tell anybody. I started on the eve of my 40th birthday. So I started my career, much as it may not look like it today, as an accountant. Still technically am. I pay my institution fees institution, that's probably a good word, fees on an annual basis. And within about 4 weeks of joining said large, I think it was Big Six, so that does show my age. One of the HR directors came up to me and said, "You're a pure." I went, "Oh, what?" And they said, "A pure, a P-U-R-E." I said, "What the hell is a pure?" And I said, "Oh, that's a previously unrecognized recruitment error." Fortuitously, I went on to stay with that organisation for another 6 years, but actually what he was describing is you don't fit the mold. And it took me the best part of 10 years before I ended up leaving and being part of the startup community. And I was a hanger-on. I kind of was an early employee for a while, and I did a bit of corporate finance, raising money for people. I was terrible at that.
So when you were there for 10 years, did you feel like you're missing something, or you were totally happy being there?
No, I was just drunk. They pay well, being an accountant. No, if you actually look at my career, it's not obvious on my LinkedIn, but every 18 months I changed my job. And even inside the large corporate, every 18 months I changed my job. And so I think what became apparent was I have a really low patience. And so actually working in a large corporate doesn't necessarily work particularly well for me. But no, you don't know it until you've kind of done it. I didn't know that I was actually good at other stuff until I tried it.
And you stumbled onto it, or what happened?
It took such a bloody long time to get there.
Yes, so how did you discover this is something which you need to try?
I didn't. So there's a thing called imposter syndrome. Anybody heard of imposter syndrome? So basically I still have massive, like, they're going to find me out. It's like, yeah. Maybe if I keep running fast enough, nobody will figure out it's all bullshit. No, I mean, I think most entrepreneurs actually feel uncomfortable with that title. And I actually still don't think I'm an entrepreneur. I'm good at helping on other entrepreneurs. I wouldn't necessarily.
So when you left the job, what happened afterwards? Did you think of starting a company, or you managed to meet somebody?
I fell into it.
You fell into it?
I fell into it. So I think actually the other thing that happened in my life was I got married to my wife. And actually I think I blame everything on her. And when she's stuck at home at the minute and she's got 3 kids, and during program I come down on a Monday, I live in Cambridge or that direction, I come down on a Monday and leave on a Friday, and every time she grumbles and complains about what happened with the kids this week, it's like, well, it's your fault, you encouraged me. And she did. And actually having somebody to actually just gently push me off the cliff, so to speak, and actually having the confidence to actually just go and do it.
Yeah.
In her instance, nothing interesting really happened in my life until I met my wife.
So she provided you with support, and then you started building this.
Or she was trying to get me out of the house.
One of those things. What was the first company you started?
I don't know. It was the first accelerator.
Okay.
So in that journey of boring accounting for 10 years, jumped ship 2000, was an FD of a couple of startups, which were all the things you'd expect of a .com. Spent $25 million in a year, had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Very expensive MBA. And it went pop. There was nothing to show for it at the end of 12 months. I kind of did a couple more of those. I then did a bit of corporate finance, as I alluded to, and then accidentally turned into a VC. So one of the people I normally pitch, so at this point I'm in the northeast of England. So the bits I hadn't said before was I've been in London, I've been in Melbourne, I've been in London, I've been in California, I've been back to London, met my wife, and then moved to Newcastle. And I went, fuck, what have I done? I didn't do shipbuilding, I didn't do car manufacture, I didn't do call centres. But fortuitously for me, it was the end of the Labour days, and so they had some regional venture funds. And so in my corporate finance job, I was pitching regularly to these local venture funds, and they always ignored me. They never gave any of my businesses any money. But one day they kind of phoned me and said, we've got a fund that's almost finished, but there's a year's worth of capital still left. Would you like to come and play? I went, oh, wow. £1 million, what could I do with £1 million? And suddenly I was
it's a nice challenge.
The nicest guy in the world. It's like the number of football tickets I got, the number of I suddenly found all these friends I didn't know I had. And from that, there is a point to the story, I promise. I was regularly writing, the story is I was regularly writing checks of about 150k for early stage business. And bluntly, in the northeast of England, 5 years ago, it would have been 6 years ago, it was essentially really expensive lottery tickets. And the chances of me actually making a return were about the same odds, I think, which is about 8 million to 1.
You mentioned this expensive MBA. So early on, I'm sure there are many people who, once they get successful, they're thinking about playing as well with some money. What are the key mistakes people do when they start playing and don't know?
Start what?
Start playing with investing in companies. And like you said, expensive MBA. What are the key mistakes you did so early on, which you would not do knowing what you know now?
Don't work in the paper industry.
Okay.
There's a really good story. So nobody ever worked in the paper industry, in technology. It's like, oh, you have no idea. So the story behind the paper industry, got stories about everything. I think it's partly because of the Blarney and the Irishness. Store Enso is the oldest paper company in the world. It's 800 years old. For the first 300 years of its life, it cut down trees to get into mines. After 300 years, they weren't very smart. They worked out that they actually made more money out of the trees turning into paper than the mining that they've been doing. And by the time I got to 2000, they decided that they needed telephone systems, but they didn't trust other people with building telephone systems, so they had to build their own telephone systems. Which is ironic, because if you look at where all the really cool telco companies come from, originally it was Ericsson and Nokia, which were from the Scandinavian countries, which is where it's originally from. But they had an inherent lack of trust in anybody giving them technology. So our business was completely, it was never going to work from day zero.
So you're betting on the wrong horse? On the wrong industry?
No, we just didn't talk to the customers.
Okay.
Do you know the best part? It was set up by two people who had scholarships to Harvard doing MBAs. This is a classic 2000 story. Yeah. So both hugely smart people, like insanely smart. Sorry.
Check the other bit.
The other bit.
Yeah.
You mean it needs to be switched on?
Might have been switched on.
It's got a red light. Oh my God.
Okay, no worries.
Now I can hear myself. Oh my word.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Cool. Now all the people in the back row will laugh as well. Oh, I wish.
So you said this is the accelerator, and
you're not changing my subject. I'm going to talk about the
paper,
the Harvard MBA students.
Okay,
there's this point to that story as well.
Yeah, okay.
You thought you were interviewing me. So effectively, I mean, seriously, it was a classic.com, and you couldn't write it any better. Two Harvard MBAs, both exceptionally smart, had scholarships, did their thing in Harvard, came back, one started McKinsey, one started at Bain, and they were watching all of their fellow students leave, or employees, go and start businesses, and they're going, oh crap, everybody's left. It's like, what are we going to do? We could start a business. What could we do a business in? Oh, do you know that thesis we wrote at Harvard? We could do that. So they dusted down the thesis,
And they did a few cash flows and they said, I think we need about $10 million to do this. So the third week, think about this, this is the third week in December. And they've gone out to raise $10 million. And the VCs have come back and said, 10 million doesn't feel like enough. What would you do with 25?
Oh no.
And so they came back, and don't tell anybody, we just multiplied everything by 2.5. And said, the market's now 2.5 times bigger than we thought it was. Amazing. So we got $25 million.
So you pulled it off?
No, we pulled off raising money.
Yeah.
They closed that funding in the third week in January. All of that happened in less than, I think it was about 6 weeks.
Wow.
From the first conversation to money in the bank, $25 million on a pre-money valuation of $40 million. That was the seed round. Seriously. I mean, I was a zillionaire for about 3.5 minutes.
And you say you didn't talk to customers?
We built the best technology that nobody would want. Actually, we hired an outsourcing company called CSC. I hope nobody's in the room from CSC. Who basically spent 6 months trying to build something that didn't work, and then we had to build a team to build it. And then we, about 12 months later, went, oh, do you want this? Oh no, we don't want that. Okay.
So it took you 12 months to find out.
I had to build it to show it off. Yeah. They didn't know this thing called lean or customer development. I mean, it's like, this is really radical and novel. It's like, imagine speaking to customers. So the best part is one now works as a VC doing secondary buyouts. Another one's in private equity. So they clearly knew what they were talking about. They were just sitting on the wrong side of the table.
Wow, that's a very interesting story. What happened afterwards? So you pulled off.
He wants to change the subject.
What I want to do is you have this wealth of knowledge of startups, and this is the first mistakes you started this way, and I want to know like what directed you to the path where you are now. So this is how you started. A
personal problem.
A personal
nothing that a cream can't sort out. It was actually no, but it's so I think about doing startups as like starting a band. So yeah, it's true. So the very first album that you write, sorry, I'm showing my age. It's called an album, not a CD or a download. I can't get like, have you got a recent download? But essentially, the very first album that people typically write is built up of teenage angst over about 6 or 8 years. And so actually I think entrepreneurs effectively normally start their first business based upon some level of angst in the background. There's a problem that they're aware of themselves, and it's something that they feel hugely passionate about that they need to fix. Interestingly, if you move that analogy on, actually the problem that bands and artists actually have is typically the second album and the third. Because they've got to do it, and oh, by the way, you've got 12 months to write a new album, and you've got to tour in the meantime. And so suddenly they don't have the capacity. And so when an entrepreneur comes back for a second time, it's not normally driven by a personal desire to change a problem that they want to fix themselves. It's they see an opportunity and they try and address it. It tends to be something which is not necessarily, it's a much shorter time period. Because if they're successful, they're not being driven by money. So they can kind of go, well, let's go and start. I mean, if entrepreneurship was easy, serial entrepreneurs would be successful every time, all the time. So I think you have that, I call it the second album problem, which is what sometimes serial entrepreneurs run into.
It's a very interesting analogy. Seeing companies similar to bands, you know, we know Steve Jobs used to always use this example of Beatles and how Beatles is really fine-tuned and how other bands were not. It's very interesting. Guys, before we move on, we use this solution called Slido.
It's great.
If you have any questions, because you can ask a question as well. If you introverted don't want to raise your hands, you can do it this way. Just go to sli.do. You have the links over there. And what you can do is sli.do, and you can use the hashtag SGL, Startup Guide London. And you ask a question, and it pops here, and you can vote for the good question. You can decide which ones we'll be asking throughout the interview.
Please do not swear.
And the hashtag is Startup Grind. It's very simple. So now you look at this.
This is all over the place.
This company says bands. No,
yes, I do.
Companies
and actually, it's kind of, yeah. If you think about it, actually most bands make a record and then they fall out and they go off and do their own things. It's actually good startups do actually similar things.
Yes, different VCs have different priorities of what they look for.
Like opera and...
team, idea, opportunity. What are your priorities when you look at startups? Because I'm sure you get to look at hundreds of pitches. How do you decide?
So I apologize in advance for anybody who's heard this before. I have 5 criteria, my famous 5 criteria, which is team, opportunity and team.
Okay.
And at such an early stage, it genuinely is, there really isn't that much apart from a team.
Mm-hmm.
I also actually, interestingly, we've done some backward analysis around our most successful businesses. And so we have a broad span of teams which come in, and some have product market fit and some have revenue.
Yeah.
But actually the ones that have made me the most money or will make the most money are the ones that actually started with nothing. And so actually the thing about that is if you have genuinely very little as other than an idea, you actually have to be pretty much a rock star team. Which also makes our day job really challenging because we get clearly a lot of inbound interest to participate in Techstars. And so we will get teams which are funded, we will get teams which have traction,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes that is a distraction.
Yeah.
And we have to kind of constantly go back. I think we know, I have a slightly different approach now which says, if you didn't know anything else about the business and you could only select based upon the people sitting in front of you, would you pick that team? Now, I don't know, come back in 3 years' time, I'll
mm-hmm.
figure out whether that was the right decision. But actually, constantly it comes down to, it's just the really smart teams.
Yeah. It's really interesting. We had on this conference in February in Silicon Valley, we had Jessica Livingston, the partner of YCombinator.
Mm-hmm.
And she was mentioning they only give 10 minutes-ish to each company. And after 10 minutes, they decide,
mm-hmm.
yes or no. And she says, because she's the female element of the team, the intuition is so strong, like they decide, they select the nuances of other guys knowing each other well. Mm-hmm. How do you, because you get to see lots of applications, and you see many videos, you see many applications. What are the key points you're looking for when you're looking for an amazing team?
What am I looking for? Actually, we do something slightly different. So we crowdsource a lot of our interviews, mm-hmm. and we each independently. So my fund, Techstars London, is made up of about 25 to 30 VCs and angels who give me a little bit of money.
Yeah.
And I actually don't just take their money, I take their time. So they actually help me in participation of selection of the teams. And so what we actually do is we have multiple series of interviews, and actually we cross-reference against each other. Mm-hmm. So I'm a strong believer in that an entrepreneur can smell another entrepreneur. I'm not sure that's the right analogy, but if you put 2 entrepreneurs in a room, they can recognize similar traits to each other.
Yeah.
So we use slightly more distributed model.
So you have several rounds in a way.
So we would, I mean, it's not that dissimilar. We have a desktop review, then we have a series of interviews, then we have another series of interviews, mm-hmm. and a final series.
What does such an interview look like?
It's normally on a screen about that big.
So it's Skype?
Skype. And actually the one thing that you have to be really careful about is, and our final interviews are in person, and you can't really make a final decision without physically meeting them.
Yeah.
When we get to the final interview, sometimes overseas teams will Skype in because they're coming from Korea or something. Sure, yeah. And you have to be a pretty spectacular entrepreneur to be able to get your passion and energy through a screen, mm-hmm. 6,000 miles away. And I'm thinking of one person who has done that and has actually gone on to be massively successful.
Okay. Now you have this interview. Do you interview the whole team or?
Oh yeah. We try to get them all on screen. I think the biggest risk that you have with that approach is if English is not your native language, there is a massive risk that you miss cultural nuances. Yes. and also just the language can sometimes get in the way. And so the risk of doing a 10-minute interview is you just don't pick up on those cultural differences. And I think I become increasingly sensitive to those things.
I'm sure you need to be very good at
someone with a really heavy accent as well.
We can still understand. What is your...
Nobody has a word. They laughed at your joke, they didn't laugh at mine.
That's coming from me.
It's when they have subtitles at the bottom of the video.
We don't have this technology, otherwise we're using it. Now, when you interview so many companies, I'm sure you need to be really good at saying no. What are the warning signs you're looking at when you're interviewing somebody?
People who talk too much. So kind of you ask a question, I need an answer. I don't need like a whole scripture. And sometimes people kind of over embellish. And you have to be careful because people get nervous in interviews and sometimes overspeak. So that tends to be, I think it's actually, do you know the simplest one, which is listen to the question and answer the question. The risk is sometimes what you hear and what you think was said sometimes are two different things. And that really, really winds me up. Because it demonstrates that you're just locked into autopilot mode.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think I know what this question is without really thinking about it. Yeah, that will.
So are the good ones good at rephrasing? Maybe if they're not sure what you asked, do you mean, and they rephrase what you say?
It depends if I like the team.
Okay.
Yeah, look, people are stuck in a room with me for 13 weeks. It's not all fun and laughter. Ask them. No, seriously, the one thing that there is actually a really strong sense is there is a certain type of person that I want to sit in a room with for 13 weeks and help and work with. Yeah. The thing that you have to kind of be mindful of is sometimes entrepreneurs can actually be a bit of a pain in the ass. And so you can't kind of have a monotone, vanilla approach to entrepreneurs. You actually want people who are a little bit edgy and kind of cause a little bit of irritation on occasions. But there's a very physicality. There's a big difference between Techstars and YC is we actually put all 10 teams in a room side by side for 13 weeks.
Yes.
And I actually think is much closer to an MBA than a distributed system.
Like a very practical MBA.
Yeah, but it's actually the cohort effect. If you're going to get really smart people, not dissimilar to an MBA, in a room side by side, it's not just what you're learning in front of you, it's actually what you learn from and who the people that sit around you. You get a massive amount of value, and actually therefore what we describe the cohort and the alumni effect that you get afterwards is much, much tighter, much stronger. And that's something we work really hard with. And also we tend to work really hard to bind one class with the next class. I think in London itself we do monthly alumni drinks for anybody who's ever been in Springboard or Techstars.
It's a very good idea. Before we jump into this, I still want to dig out a little bit. So we have this audience here, and are there any startups here who are thinking about joining an Accelerator or maybe Techstars? Yeah. So we have a bunch of people here who are thinking about that.
Don't. Oh, sorry, did I say that aloud?
What I want to know is there something where a team which you usually might not have seen as a good team, they can learn from this session and apply that, or is the team spirit or the team energy so strong that you can't fake it?
So two things I'd probably say is apply early. Don't apply when you think you're going to get in. It's like doing a job interview. You do a few job interviews before you actually have the one that you really want. The other advantage is if you apply early, you get on our radar much earlier. And so there's a wonderful blog post which I encourage everybody to read, written by a guy called Mark Schuster, which was called Lines Not Dots. And the idea behind it is people make decisions based upon not points in time, but progression and change. And so if you apply early, what will happen is you'll say, look, we're doing this thing, we're super early, but this is what we plan on doing. If you subsequently apply to a program 3 months later, and actually you start to deliver some of those promises that you made on the previous application, because we can see that, then we start to think about, this is somebody that does stuff rather than talks about it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the inherent problems and flaws of really short application windows, is you have a really short time to make a decision. And so we find that actually some of our best teams are the ones that have applied 2 or 3 times before they get in.
Okay.
And it's also a demonstration coming back to the original
the same
part.
idea, or they are?
Yeah, it's the same idea.
Okay.
They're just too early.
Really
That's why I'm saying, don't worry about applying too early. It's better to be on our radar at an early stage and then keep coming back and saying, you know, I said I was going to do that, I did it. You know, I said I was going to do that, I did it. And to some extent, my day job in what I did with Springboard was something similar, which is I said I was going to go and do something, and I delivered it, and my investors were happy. And then I came back and asked them for some more money, and did it, and I came back. And so a lot of what you are is you build up a reputation for being a doer rather than a talker. It's very easy for somebody to sit in a room and talk about all the things they're going to do in the future. I'd say join the back of the queue.
And never deliver.
They just, they talk about all the stuff that's going to happen in the future.
It's really interesting that you can also apply after you've been dismissed or not approved. You can still come back and.
Oh, totally. Wait, seriously, it's the thing that is very consistent, and it applies to all good accelerators.
Yeah. What I keep hearing a lot from guys who don't really understand how accelerators work is, well, how much equity they take and how much money they give it for this equity, and they see it as a pure formula of how much is my company worth.
Yep.
What do you say to those guys?
I then phone my boss and say, you know what, we should just do the program for 5% and not give them cash, because then they would stop trying to imply a valuation. He tells me where to stick it, and then I have to go back to the team. So the way we normally pitch it back is the cash that you receive represents about 10% of the overall value.
Yeah.
So actually applying that as a simple mechanic doesn't work. The other way we sell it in is, do you think your business is going to be worth at least 6% more at the end of the program than it is at the start? So you're no worse off. The way we now address that problem is we have something called an equity-backed guarantee, which I encourage you to ask all of your investors. Essentially says, if you get to the end of the program, you have the right to name the price of the equity that you want, from 0 to 6. So if you got to the end and you don't think that we delivered the value that you expected to get, you can come back and say, actually, I only thought it was worth 4%. Now, we do something called an NPS score at the end of our programs to make sure that my entire bonus historically was based upon one score, which was, would you recommend Techstars to another person? 0 to 10. Our target is 90%.
Wow.
London is running at 84.5%. It dropped from 85 to 84.
What happened?
God, I got so much shit for that.
But knowing this,
but because we know people actually when they get to the end go, that was awesome.
Yeah.
We basically say, look, forget about the 6%. We'll take 6% now. If you get to the end and you hate it, you get to name the price.
That's really disruptive in the industry.
Nobody else has followed it.
Yes.
And maybe that's a symptom of maybe some accelerators aren't delivering.
But now
value.
after people hear,
and that's not pointed at anybody, but like that's a really good measure.
Yeah, it is. It is. You know, the next thing is also, yes, it's only 6% equity you give to Techstars, but 90% of startups who go through a program get invested in, and the average is something around $2 million. So the chances are really in companies' favors. Not even mentioning the mentorship part.
Yeah.
Before we go into mentorship, I want to still know, how did you end up being with Techstars? Because you started this Springboard Accelerator.
I started something before that. I did something really bad in a previous life. My very first program was called the Difference Engine, and it ran in Middlesbrough. If you don't know where it is, look it up on Wikipedia. It's I did something really bad.
What happened?
I don't know, but I ended up in Middlesbrough. You have obviously never been to Middlesbrough. It's like Coventry, but it makes Coventry look glamorous. But what was really interesting, so I ran my very first program. It was using public money, which was where I had originally sourced my venture fund.
Yeah.
And I ran this thing in Middlesbrough, and then I had to do it again in Sunderland, which wasn't really that much better, if I'm being honest. But actually, from that very first program, we had 9 teams. 4 came from overseas, which was unheard of. Overseas wasn't across the water on Teesside. It was actually over the other side of the water. But that, of those 9 teams, actually, those teams have gone on to raise $25 million. And it was clearly there was something inherently interesting in the process rather than actually the background. And that actually, whilst it felt like I had done something really bad in my life, actually gave me evidence that actually this worked. Because if I'd run it in Cambridge or I'd run it in London, people would have made an excuse. It was because it was London. Anyway, the point that you're trying to make, which is well made, is David Cohen from Techstars helped me set up that very first program.
Okay.
I had managed to blag the money. I had no idea how to do this. I was going to do one of those regular European, like we'll do a few workshops and we'll bring some accountants in and we'll bring some marketing people in and they'll make them smart. That was going to never work. Fortuitously, somebody had said to me, why don't you email Paul Graham and David Cohen? It's like, what have you got to lose? So I emailed Paul. Paul wrote back and said, look, I'm completely crushed. I'm in the middle of a program. There's stuff on my website. Sorry, can't help. Emailed David Cohen. David said, yeah, I'll find 30 minutes on a Skype call for you if you want.
Was he still running Techstars already?
Yeah, this was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And so my wife at that point said, you know what, you've got the money to run this program. Why don't you just get on a plane and go to Boulder? So I went to Boulder for a 30-minute meeting. And 10 minutes into it, David said, I like you, how can I help? I said, you could tell me how to do one of these things. So I went back 6 weeks later and we sat in a room for 3 days and just talked about what worked and what didn't. And then he got on a plane and came to Newcastle upon Tyne.
No way, wow.
Yeah.
And you were on your own or you had a team as well?
Sorry?
You had a team back then?
No, it was me. I had a crazy idea. It was a crazy idea. Never do this.
Because
anyway,
you say it's important for you to have a team?
No, it was me
and
blagging
back then it was just you pitching.
It was just me. Okay. Ignore everything I do. It's just complete disaster.
Do you select people who are applying as the solopreneurs?
Yeah, that doesn't work. But then
it worked for you.
Shut up. I'm going to tell you. Let's move on.
No, it's very interesting because you must have said to him something special. Like he must have seen something in you to be able to see that something amazing comes out of it, right? And so look, it's Techstars.
He had a lot of inbound interest. This was kind of about the point they stopped being in Boulder, and I think they'd opened Boston and Seattle.
Yeah.
Pardon me. What I had that the others didn't was I had money.
Oh, okay.
So what I had managed to do was I'd managed to blag the money to run the program. I just didn't know how to do it. But the wonderful thing about getting money from the public sector, particularly under the last government, was if you just sounded smart, they would go, "Ooh, here's some money." And that's not a political statement, it's just the truth.
Yeah.
I think I managed to engineer the numbers, and effectively the janitor could have signed the check for what I needed, which was just under £500,000. And so lots of people kept coming to David and saying, I want to do this program. And he go, this is really hard because you've got to get some money and you've got to get engagement. And I turned up and going, I got the money, I just don't know how to do it. And he went, okay. He's obviously managed to blag his way into getting some money. Yeah. I think that was the bit that made him sit up. And it wasn't he needed the money from me. He didn't ask me for any money at all. But that was the hurdle that differentiated me from lots of other people.
So from starting talking to David, how much time did it take to kind of come on board as Techstars?
5 years.
5 years?
No, 4 years. 4 years. What I think was really interesting, and philosophically this is actually really important for us, is David helped me, which would have now been 5 years ago, to help set up a program in the arse end of nowhere, otherwise known as Middlesbrough in the UK. He didn't have to do it, but he philosophically felt that actually what he had was something really interesting and he wanted to share it with other people. And so he helped me set up what was the difference engine which turned into Springboard. And just under 2 years ago, he came and knocked on my door and said, I'm thinking about not being just in the US. I want to be overseas. Yeah. Would you like to run London? And clearly at that point I went, I could compete or I could join. I could compete, I think I'll join. And it was actually him being a nice guy 4 years earlier, for no other reason apart from I think this would be good, actually was already setting in motion his international strategy.
Yeah.
And kind of the whole world we live in is all, we philosophically have just one statement we live by, which is give first. The first thing you should do is ask, what can I do to help?
You're one of the best companies I have ever seen doing this. Since you've been running it before and now you just became Techstars, did the corporate culture of the Accelerator change, or you were just doing the same way?
Jess, has it changed?
Jessica is the director which used to work with
me,
Jon
and then ran away
at Techstars, and now Jessica works at Barclays Accelerator, which is powered by Techstars.
Yeah.
There's a lot more people to lean on in the company. I think it probably made both our jobs easier initially because we went from suddenly operating everything on our own to having all these other people to lean on. When you have programs across the world in different locations, there's some centralized resources which suddenly you don't have to run.
You haven't answered the question.
Yeah. Oh, has it changed?
The corporate culture.
I feel like a bigger family.
You failed. Get to the back of the queue.
Okay. It's just a big family, but it's still friendly and...
yeah. Go on.
I think it's just become a bigger family.
Yeah.
I was nervous that it would change, to be perfectly honest, but I didn't. I've loved the change. Anyways, I'll let you answer now.
It's called good delegation, yes.
So
no, it hasn't changed, sorry. It hasn't changed.
So Techstars London is the only place apart from the US.
So far.
Do you plan to expand to other cities as Techstars?
Maybe.
Maybe. Or it's not public information yet?
Don't tell anybody.
Okay, we won't be digging into too much.
Let me put it this way. I would be massively disappointed. So one of the other things that we think a lot about is we strongly believe, and I am a strong advocate of this. Hello?
I just want to ask a question.
Can I finish mine?
Let's do questions.
Was I really that boring? I'll just interrupt you.
Yeah. Go on.
Give me 2 seconds. So, as you can figure out, I'm not English. I'm originally from Belfast, a very, very long time ago. And if there's a screw loose in my brain, it's because I was born in the same year as the Troubles. You can figure that out. I'm an old fart. But I strongly believe that I lived in a community where opportunity didn't exist. You just were surviving. And so therefore I think I'm predisposed in what I do as my day job, and everything that I do is all about helping others, not having to deal with the shit that I had to put up with. And I didn't have that much shit to put up with. I came from a middle class family which tends to insulate itself from problems.
So you want to make it easier for others?
I don't want you to be 39 when you start your first business. I think there's a whole bunch of value you can do much, much earlier in the system.
Yeah. So now you're Techstars, and Techstars has 2 things at which they are amazing. We mentioned the first one, give first, and I keep seeing this from all the Techstars people I've ever met. The second, and probably the most important part of Techstars is, and Techstars is one of the best companies doing this, is mentorship.
No, the best part is that actually we're entrepreneur first. No, we're not entrepreneur first, not that of entrepreneur first. We're entirely entrepreneur centric.
Yes.
And actually it's really important to recognize. So typically as an investor, you put yourself potentially at odds to your counterparties, the founders. So one of the things that we do, which is super important, is we take exactly the same shares that you have. We have no preference rights. We have, it's the lightest documentation that you've ever seen in your life. But we take exact same shares. And the reason why we do that is we essentially believe that actually if you as a founder make money, we will make money, and vice versa. At all points through a negotiation, when you go through all of those different stages of investment, we want to be on your side. What's also important to recognize is even if ultimately it might be perceived in the short term to be detrimental to us, we will always do what the founder wants to do. We will clearly give advice, but we will always follow the founder. We always have found in retrospect that doing the right thing by the founder has ultimately benefited us personally as investors. And sometimes you have to hit a point in the crossroads and actually make that decision, and we will always stick to what is the right thing to do by the founder, whatever that might be.
Even if you think sometimes maybe the founder is making a mistake?
Well, that's our problem because we haven't given them enough data.
Okay.
But ultimately, so for example, in my last program, I can't tell you too many of the gory details because it's under a contract.
Yeah.
But essentially we had 2 founders turned up. Actually, we only had 1 founder turn up from a previous business. And we discovered that the co-founder probably was doing something he shouldn't have been doing. And we suddenly were sitting there going, right, okay, first day of the program, where's your co-founder? He's not here. Okay, what happened? Can't tell you. Okay, well, you could tell me, I can't tell you. But essentially, we kind of went into this mode of like, you really don't have a business. You don't have a co-founder, there's nothing here. The natural thing is, leave the room, please. In the meantime, he had gone off and said, leave it with me, give me a week, I'm going to go and find a co-founder and try to rebuild this business from start. And so we kind of went, this is just never going to work, but we'll give him a week. And so what we ended up doing was, but we would never sling him out of the program. We made it very clear to him that the decision to leave would be his, and if he wanted to keep his head down and keep going, we would be massively supportive. The thing that we would hold back is if he wasn't prepared to go and do demo day at the end, we would stop that.
Yeah.
But we would support him for the whole 13 weeks if necessary. And we essentially had this almost like 1 week probationary system that he had to come back and justify to himself that the struggle was worth the effort.
Yes.
And he ended up coming out the other end and completely blew everybody away.
I want to stay on this point on the entrepreneur first, because it's this is in this context, like you have these startups coming in, and you are entrepreneur first. What are the traits? Because you say an entrepreneur can smell an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
What are the traits which you see are very common in guys which you like to work with?
I don't know. Relative. I was going to say emotional EQ, but actually I know a few of my entrepreneurs have 0 EQ. The single sole thing which is constant and consistent across the board is sheer bloody tenacity and persistence and bloody mindedness.
Just keep cranking.
Yeah.
Keep grinding. Yeah.
And sometimes it can be to their detriment, and that's actually one of the hardest things that entrepreneurs have to work out is when do you stop? And only the entrepreneur, I personally believe only the entrepreneur can make that call and judgment. It's not my job to do it.
And that's a good point. So when you have a startup coming in, how common it is that they pivot within the program?
I think 90% of all businesses are not what they started.
Wow.
Now they kind of like, it's not like we start as a pet farm, or there's such a business.
This changed slightly, yeah.
Or a social network for cats and dogs. That is a real business, believe it or not. It didn't work. It starts there and it ends up being a B2B SaaS solution for payment solutions. You tend to find that inside, that'd be an interesting idea. You tend to find that people work inside the constraints of the industry or the sector or the function. And it's how they address a market, who they might flip the model so the customer's slightly different. There may be things that happen inside that. And actually that's one of the reasons why sometimes working with teams which are slightly earlier is actually easier to deal with, because they don't carry the baggage of but we've got these customers, or we built all of this product. If you've got nothing, actually it's much easier to bin that and say, what if we did something else? And the brave, I was in Newcastle yesterday talking to some teams up there, and actually one of the things I say to people is, if you decide that you want to make a pivot, I actually don't like that word, but if you want to change your business, I strongly believe that you have to make a significant or material change to your business. I've never seen businesses nudge themselves out of a problem. Does that make sense? So everybody kind of tweaks stuff on the edges. You actually almost have to overcompensate and say, if we went there, what would it look like? Now, you might adjust back, but it's really hard to go like these little nudges. You don't get any material effect, or you can't see the change to your business. So be bold when you decide to make a change to your business. Don't be shy.
Maybe you want to explain how Techstars works with these 3-month programs. Do you differentiate the program in those 3 key parts, or it's continuous change? Like the first month is deconstructing the business model, making sure it works. How does it work exactly?
So at its highest level, and I don't know whether this was deliberate, I think it was accidental. People refer to these things as boot camps, 13-week accelerator boot camp. It actually resembles very similarly a boot camp from the military sources, which is essentially you spend most of the first month challenging all of your assumptions inside your business and breaking it down. And then you may build it back almost the same, but you've challenged everything inside your business.
Yes.
And essentially that is most of the first month. And essentially then you work through the second and third month with a bunch of the mentors that have supported you in the deconstruction process in month 2 and month 3. And then we add another bit on top, which is in month 3, you have to then be able to stand up and articulate your business. And actually it's really interesting in the process of learning to articulate your business actually helps to focus your business. And so we're super aggressive about being really clear and articulate about what your business is, and being succinct, which is what I'm really bad at, but essentially being very precise with your language. And so the way we tend to I think about that is, imagine you had to write a 500-word blog post on your business and describe it. It's very easy for somebody to stand up and talk for 5 minutes and full of BS, yeah? And it's wafty and it's all over the place. If you actually think about writing your pitch as a 500-word blog describing what your business is, it's actually really good discipline, because you actually then start to think about word to word. Is that actually what I do? Steve Jobs, everybody recognizes, was the master of presentations. That wasn't off the cuff. They methodically thought about everything they wanted to say in the right order and how they said it.
That's very true. Now, after these 3 months, the businesses are kind of getting ready for the big day, for the demo day. What are the most common problems they try to solve within those 3 months, which you think are the key kind of starting mistakes of entrepreneurs, which you see in most startups?
So the common mistake, which comes up time and time again, is people don't test the assumptions inside their business. And another way of describing that is called customer development. You have a theory in your head about, you think this might be the case. As I described, you have to stop it being the voices in your head and actually try and get them out in the real world and get other people to either validate or disagree with your assumptions. Now, it's not one person, but it has to be multiple people, because any given person might be wrong. But if you get enough data, I think that singularly is the reason why businesses fail.
We actually have an interesting blog video with Steve Blank talking about this at Startup conference about customer development. He came up with the concept, and it's really useful because many companies, they just rely on the feedback from their friends and peers, but don't really dig into it, and they don't have the loop of customer development feedback.
I got told off by the statement, so this is not a statement you've normally heard, is your dad doesn't count as customer development. You might have heard that with a different gender in the past. And actually, it's why should it be that gender? Why not the other gender?
Mm-hmm. That's very true. We have a
testing assumptions. Yeah, do things which are inherently different.
And what do you recommend to your startups? Going out there to your target market, or going online, or what do they do?
I fell out with somebody yesterday. I'm a really strong believer in call people. Actually speak to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can hide behind surveys and say, here's a bunch of, tick a bunch of boxes. It actually speaking to people. If you can speak to 10 people who you think might be your customers, to speak to 10 people, you might have to phone 50, but you get so much more data. It's not dissimilar. It's like one's 2-dimensional, one's 3-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard, and people hate it.
It is. It's
like,
hustling, and
you want me to, and I can see it in our program. We have a bunch of associates in Hackstars, and you can see the founders going, "Can you phone?" It's like, well, it's your business.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
It's out of the comfort zone, right? But they still should do it. Yes. We have a very good question here on Slido.
I have a point. Actually, there's an interesting bit to that.
Yeah.
The bit that you have to remember is my definition of asking a question is somebody going to die if you ask the question? Yeah? If the answer to that is no, then it's safe to ask the question. But people actually, no, but seriously, people get like really wound up about, actually, I'm going to ask them, do they want this product? And the risk is they say no. And you go,
nothing happens.
The world hasn't stopped, has it? Yeah? And so actually you learn as an entrepreneur that actually not to be scared of no. There's a wonderful, I can't remember the guy's name, the guy who set up Yo Sushi was once told, sorry? Simon has in his book this statement, which is somebody once told him you've got a 1 in 100 chance of raising money from an angel. And so he took it upon himself that every time he spoke to an angel and they said no, he thought, I'm one closer to my angel. Yeah, and so suddenly just got learned that actually no wasn't going to kill his business. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, you're going to ask.
It's a very healthy mindset. I want to ask a question from Slido, which Irene asks: do you accept applications from entrepreneurs starting a business in parallel to a corporate job? You can't do the program and do a real job at the same time. You can, however, apply if you promise me that you're going to quit your job and come and do the startup. And I actually have a guy who did that with Google. He literally finished his job at Google on the Friday and started on Monday. Now, what he had actually done was he had run the other business in parallel to Google. So he was actually out selling product. He looked like a complete train wreck. Yeah. Actually looked like he was in drugs. Might have been. But he was actually, what he was doing was, from his day job at Google, he was actually paying an engineer to build the product. And in the evening, he was actually selling his product to agencies. And it's kind of that just like hacker hustler type thing that was going on. But he had to clearly give up his day job at Google. Interesting, it was a guy from Google that referred him to us. Okay. And said, there's this great guy internally and you should really speak to him and tell him he should quit his Google job and go and do this business. Yeah. And he's been awesome. This is, so you don't recommend to sit on 2 chairs at the same time. You can't do that, you have to choose, right?
That's how I started my business. So the way I start, and actually the weird part is the way I've kind of constantly started another job or helped start another business is I've found enough time in my diary, that's called typically a Saturday or Sunday, and pay myself and give me the capacity, and maybe part of it's because I'm married and have kids, so I have a certain level of responsibility to know that I've got something to jump on to jump something next. And there is inherent risk, but how do you get to a natural point to de-risk one for the next thing? And I've done that. That was what I did when I was VC. I was doing the VC job, I think, 3 or 4 days a week, and it gave me the balancing number of days in the week to plot the pattern of what I was going to do. And as I say, that might be an age thing, but I quite like de-risking of things. I mean, the real part is we talk about venture funding about being risk capital. Actually, it's a lie. Venture capitalists are about de-risking. They spend their life mitigating risk. And so, whilst you may not be the person partnering with cash, you're partnering with your time. And it's your responsibility to manage the risk to your personal time. I mean, this is harder for people who are in the first half of their life versus the second half of their life. When you get to the second half of your life, you become much more acutely aware of actually the thing that you have, which is consistent, whether you're a billionaire, being Bill Gates, or someone who's an oldie. Not that I have a problem with people in Aldi. But you only have 24 hours in a day. Bill Gates can't magic up extra time in his day. And so you think you're investing your time in your business. There's an opportunity cost associated with that. You have to justify to yourself, if I'm not doing this, I could be doing something else. And you're playing constantly arbitrage. And that's the thing that you have to, as entrepreneurs, be wise about what you do with your time.
Yes, before we go to the questions from the audience, I want to still mention a few things about the mentorship, which is kind of digged into the DNA of Techstars.
Yeah.
How do you select your mentors?
They come to us.
They come to you. Yeah. And how do you use them to help your startups get better?
So we tend to be very heavily focused towards mentors which are entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Actually, to the point where actually we kind of keep VCs, don't tell any of them, out for a while. Because sometimes, believe it or not, VCs don't have real experience of the real world. They're really good at doing spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Shh, don't tell them. And they have inherent their value. But we very strongly believe in this notional idea of the programs for entrepreneurs. It's funded by entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And it's supported by entrepreneurs. It's kind of the secret club. And so we're constantly looking for, I think of it as two spectrums, and this clearly it is a spectrum. You would have somebody highly experienced that might have built and sold a big business, but it might have been 10 years ago. Let's call it Brent Hoberman.
Yeah.
Smart guy, really well connected.
Yeah, we're thinking to him, talking to him, coming to
awesome,
stage, yeah.
Awesome guy. But if you basically said to him, what's it like to do a seed round? He'd go, what's that?
He doesn't remember, yeah.
That was 10 years ago. But he is inherently well connected and knows lots of people and gives you unfair access.
Yeah.
Interestingly, we actively court smart entrepreneurs on their way through. We don't actually think that you have to come out and be successful at the other end to be able to add value to help people. Actually, having someone who has recently completed a seed round coming in and talking to the teams about what it is like to do a seed round actually is more valuable at that point. So you kind of constantly have this blend, which is part experience and knowledge and partly to do with contacts.
Yes.
And the process of an accelerator is based around trusted relationships. So if you get introduced by a mentor inside of Techstars, the likelihood is the person who makes the introduction or being introduced will respond and respond relatively quickly.
Yes.
And so that kind of trusted bond between people actually makes the whole thing just go that much faster.
How do you make sure that these mentors, because you have some really high-level mentors in the program, assign enough time for your startups?
We score them.
Oh, okay. So
shh, don't tell anyone.
Net Promoter Score again?
Something comparable. But so we limit the number of mentors into our program. I think on any given day, London will have about 100 on the list. Typically 80 will turn up.
Yeah.
If a mentor doesn't appear for 2 programs, they get written out. So there's nobody on our list that doesn't participate in our program. We also run scoring by the teams on mentors. And if they consistently get negative feedback, A, we will speak to them, but B, potentially they will get churned out. So typically 10 to 15% will not be asked back again.
Yes.
And we will add another 10 or 15% into the bottom. But we're constantly looking at retaining quality. The other thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about is Actually, we played around with it and we haven't done it particularly well. We will go back and do it again, is doing a mentor school, which is teaching mentors how to mentor better. So we constantly think about all
It's
those
really hard
different
because
elements.
nobody is doing it properly, and mentorship is still this vague, not really clean, clear idea.
And the weird part is some people are really good at it. Yeah. And a lot of it's to do with how you question people.
Do you think mentorship should be, like being in a business school, should be taught by a business school?
It could be valuable. I think just, so there is a way to be, we wrote, actually in fairness, David Cohen wrote something called the Mentor Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually worth you guys grabbing it. And actually, if you're thinking about people that you want to work with, it's actually push it under the nose. And it basically said 10 or 11 point list of this is what we expect of a mentor.
Yeah.
And then there's simple little crude things that we do, which is, if as a mentor you don't know the answer, you say, I don't know the answer, as opposed to bullshit.